The innocent maid the crime lord went to war for is actually a wanted murderer. Viktor Krovik thought he could break Lucian Vali by kidnapping his new obsession and exposing her 15-year-old secret, that at 9 years old she burned a man alive. But when they put a gun to her disabled brother's head, she didn't cower. She threw herself straight into the crossfire, proving to the underworld that she's deadlier than the man protecting her. Picture this wild scenario. The sky is pouring over Manhattan, raining so hard it is washing the sins off the pavement. Emma is just 4 blocks from safety when her blood runs ice cold. She spent 14 months scrubbing blood-stained floors for the city's top crime lord, staying totally off the radar until tonight. 3 shadows trap her in a dark alley. They do not want her cash. They want to leave a message in her bruises. As the first punch hits, her only thought is her brother Caleb. But fate loves a sick joke. She does not wake up in some gutter. She wakes up under crystal chandeliers with the most dangerous man in New York staring right at her. You and I both know the truth here. The hardest falls never happen in the dark. They happen the second you are dragged into the light. Let us rewind to where this whole nightmare kicked off. The massive grandfather clock in the corridor just struck 11 at night, echoing loud through the empty halls. Emma pushes this heavy industrial mop, feeling a nasty click in her left knee with every single step. Her back is throbbing and her hands are completely raw from the bleach. She has already been trapped inside this mansion for 6 hours, and she still has 2 more to go. 6 days a week, doing the exact same brutal routine. In a crazy place like this, surviving means turning yourself into a ghost. You make the marble floors shine, you clean up the mystery blood from the study, and you definitely do not ask questions, especially when it comes to the boss, Lucian Vali. Even hearing that guy's name sends a chill down your spine. Up until now, she had seen the big boss exactly 11 times. Usually, it was just from a distance, watching his expensive suit cut through doorways like a literal knife. He moved with this terrifying cold precision that made heavily armed guards hold their breath. Suddenly, a voice snaps her back to reality. Emma jumps out of her skin. It is Clara, the head housekeeper and literally the only person in this giant tomb who actually uses Emma's real name. Clara tells her she should go home, but Emma just points at a fresh stain. The truth is, staying late means extra cash. It means affording 1 more hour of physical therapy for her brother Caleb. See, true sacrifice does not scream for attention, guys. It just keeps its head down, ignores the pain, and keeps scrubbing the floor. Clara gives her a serious warning about the incoming storm, dropping her cold act for just a second. Emma puts her mop away, grabs her worn-out jacket, and slips out the back service door. The October wind immediately bites into her face. Clara was totally right. The air tastes super heavy, like rusted iron, and a massive storm waiting to break. She only has 4 short blocks to walk to the subway. These streets technically belong to the Vali crime family, which strangely means they are usually the safest blocks in the city. Street thugs know better than to mess it around here. Emma has walked this exact path hundreds of times without a problem, but tonight is different. The street lamps are flickering like crazy. A primal instinct crawls right up the back of her neck, screaming to run. She forces her exhausted legs to move faster as massive drops of rain start slapping against the concrete. Then, she hears it, footsteps right behind her, heavy splashes in the puddles. Emma's chest gets tight, but she tries to gaslight herself into staying calm. She takes a sharp left down a narrow side street she knows perfectly. But the footsteps take the turn right behind her. Her heart is hammering so loud it drowns out the storm. She can actually see the glowing subway entrance just ahead. But then, a guy steps out from a dark doorway and totally blocks her path. He is wearing a dark jacket, hands deep in his pockets. He stares her down and casually asks if she works for the Valley family. Every single survival instinct tells her to run, but her legs turn into solid concrete. She tries to play it cool, keeping her voice steady and claiming she has no idea what he is talking about. But then another guy sneers from right behind her. Emma whips around. Two more massive dudes step out of the shadows, completely blocking her escape route. They had literally been watching her leave the mansion. The rain is coming down in thick gray sheets now. She starts begging, swearing she is just a nobody who cleans floors. But the first guy steps closer, showing off a nasty scar slicing right through his eyebrow. He gives her this absolute psycho smile. He tells her it does not matter what she knows. Working in that house makes her the perfect message. She makes a desperate break for the street, but a massive hand grabs her coat and violently throws her straight into a disgusting alleyway. She barely gets a word out before his knuckles smash right into her jaw. Blinding white pain takes over, and the taste of warm copper fills her mouth. The scarred dude mumbles about it being business, but she can barely hear over the ringing. Then, a second brutal punch sinks into her ribs with a sickening crack. Emma drops down hard onto the freezing concrete. She tries to curl up, but heavy boots start stomping into her spine. Every single breath feels like actual fire. In that terrifying moment, only one thought keeps her fighting: her brother Caleb. If she dies here, he dies too. She completely pushes past the agony and tries to stand up. That is the thing about family. It makes you stand when your bones are literally breaking. But another kick catches her ribs, slamming her face into the mud. The scarred guy barks an order to back off. They need her breathing, so Valia actually gets the message. Their heavy footsteps fade out into the storm. Emma just lies there, bleeding on the wet ground, her lungs completely on fire. The world fades to black, and the last thing she feels is the subway rumbling beneath her, a train she is never going to catch. But then, an incredibly sharp light forces her eyes open. She shuts instantly. Her entire body feels like it is made of shattered glass. When she tries to move, pure agony shoots through her chest. A calm voice tells to chill out, mentioning cracked ribs and a bad concussion. Emma slowly forces her eyes open again. Instead of a filthy gutter, she is staring up at glowing crystal chandeliers, lying on what feels like silk sheets. She fights the dizziness and sees an older guy sitting by the bed. He has steel gray hair and eyes that look like they have seen way too much Mafia business. He is wearing a medical coat over a fancy suit. When Emma tries to talk, her throat is totally dry. He gives her a sip of water and casually drops a bomb. She is inside Lucien Valley's personal home. His enforcers found her in the storm 7 hours ago and saved her life. Now, stick with me here, because this is exactly where the plot thickens. Emma ignores the crazy pain and tries to get out of bed. She has to get back to Caleb. But before the doctor can even stop her, this massive, terrifying shadow blocks the doorway. A deep, totally unyielding voice cuts right through the silence of the room. Your brother is already here. Imagine a voice so insanely heavy, it literally sucks the oxygen out of the room without even yelling. Emma's eyes shoot to the door. Lucien Varelli is standing there like he owns the concept of air. Over 6 feet tall in a flawless black suit, looking totally carved out of ice. When he locks eyes with her, Emma literally forgets how to breathe. He lists off her entire life in a dead, flat tone. Caleb Vale, 19, paralyzed, stuck on the fourth floor with no elevator. Emma is totally freaking out. She manages to whisper, "How do you know all that?" He steps into the room like an absolute predator and says he knows every single thing that happens in his house, including the fact that she has scrubbed his floors for 14 months and he never even bothered to learn her name. She quietly replies, "Emma Vale." He repeats her name, testing how it sounds. Then he just keeps reading her life story. 24 years old, mother gone. $118,000 in medical debt, working 3 different jobs. Every word hits her like a truck. She wants to look away, but his intense stare totally pins her down. Lucian casually drops that her brother is in the East Wing with elite medical gear and a private nurse. Emma is absolutely stunned. She asks him why he would ever do something like that. His face gets dark. He tells her she was attacked in his territory, and since she works for him, that makes her his property to protect. He says he failed, and this is him fixing the problem. See, powerful men do not apologize. They just rewrite the rules. The doctor tries to intervene, but Lucian shuts him down. Lucian does not even blink. He tells her the guys who jumped her worked for a rival boss named Viktor Kravik, and they were using her to send a message. Emma is panicking, begging him to understand she just cleans floors. But to a guy like Lucian, that does not matter. He tells her that if she exists in his world, she is under his absolute protection. The men who touched her are already being violently dealt with. You and I know exactly what that means. He is going to show the criminal underworld what happens when you touch his people. Emma is terrified. She tells him she does not want any part of this mafia war. She just needs to go work and pay her bills. Lucian coldly cuts her off. What she wants is totally irrelevant now. She is officially part of this twisted game, whether she likes it or not. Guys, you and I have to recognize the exact second a trap snaps completely shut. Lucian just casually drops a massive bomb, telling Emma her medical bills, rent, and her brother's care are entirely paid for. Boom. Handled. Emma is freaking out, obviously, refusing his help, but Lucian hits her with the cold, hard truth. He tells her the deal is already done, locking her in like a steel vault. He says he is correcting his failure, and her old life is officially gone. The minute those goons touched her, everything changed. She has to accept his help or become a casualty. Emma calls it captivity, but here is a simple life lesson for you. Sometimes the people who save you are just putting you in a shinier cage. Lucian does not even care what she calls it. Lucian drops his voice to a dangerous rumble, telling her she is absolutely not leaving until this mess is fixed. Emma stares at this boss, managing her life like a stock option. She sits there with busted ribs, spitting fire, telling him he does not own her. Lucian gets this crazy flash in his eyes. He admits he does not own her, but he is entirely responsible for her now. He locks the door behind him like a prison cell. Emma realizes her normal life is wiped out, traded for a gilded nightmare. The lesson here is that fighting a rip current only makes you drown faster. Hours later, Emma jolts awake to pitch blackness and the horrifying sound of someone screaming. It takes 3 brutal seconds for Emma to realize the screaming is straight up coming from her own mouth. She shoots up, her broken ribs crying out, but strong hands immediately pin her down. A young nurse tells her to breathe, stopping her from yanking out her IV. Emma is hyperventilating in the dark, begging to know where Caleb is. The nurse casually drops that her brother is safely asleep on the 3rd floor, exactly as the boss ordered. Emma demands to see him, so the nurse shifts her into a wheelchair. It is a harsh reminder of her vulnerability, but here, is a solid life lesson. Sometimes knowing when to let someone else push the wheels is the only way you survive. They ride the elevator up and glide down a perfectly silent corridor until they finally reach room 7. Look at this, guys. We finally see the one thing keeping Emma from totally losing her mind. Caleb is in this high-tech hospital bed, monitors softly beeping. Emma rolls up and grabs his hand like she is holding on to the edge of a cliff. Caleb opens his eyes, looks at her busted face, and tells her she looks like absolute garbage. She just smiles, asking if the goons hurt him. Turns out, 2 guys in suits simply scooped him up to keep him safe. He genuinely thought Emma was dead, and his voice completely shatters. Emma smooths his hair, reminding him they both made it out alive. Life teaches us that the tightest bonds are always forged in the absolute worst conditions. Caleb is just mind-blown by all the crazy luxury, bragging about real doctors and eating dinner off fancy china. Caleb asks who this mystery guy is, and Emma admits he is dangerous. Caleb cannot figure out why a Mafia boss cares about them at all. Honestly, Emma has zero logical explanation. Then Caleb drops a massive bombshell. He tells her Lucian paid off every cent of her debt. Emma freezes. We are talking 6 figures of soul-crushing debt, wiped clean. But Emma is furious, swearing they do not take charity. Caleb snaps back, telling her this is not charity, it is straight-up survival. And the kid makes a solid point. The real-life lesson here is that foolish pride will never keep you breathing. Emma knows how the underworld works. Powerful men like Lucian never just hand out favors. Every gift is a trap, and they simply do not know the price tag yet. Caleb tells her they will deal with the fallout when the bill finally comes due. Right now, he has a comfortable bed, and she is not bleeding out in an alley. That is a massive win. Emma desperately wants to list every single way this mob favor is going to blow up in their faces, but exhaustion totally wipes her out. Over the next 3 days, her reality is just a blurry haze of painkillers. Her cracked ribs feel like shattered glass, and her head is pounding. But here is a beautiful life lesson hidden in the drama. Sometimes you have to endure the storm so the people you love can stay dry. Caleb is finally eating real meals and smiling again. Seeing her little brother genuinely thrive makes this impending devil's bargain feel like a trade she would make every single time. Let me tell you about true isolation, guys. Sometimes the silence inside a mansion is way scarier than the chaos outside. Emma does not see the boss for days. Clara pops in with gossip, while a quiet nurse patches up Emma's injuries. The head honcho is a total ghost. Then day 4 hits. Clara stands over her with an intense look, announcing that Mr. Very wants to see her immediately. It is definitely not a request. Getting dressed feels like walking straight to an execution. Emma wanders through the insanely rich hallways she once scrubbed on her hands and knees. Life always teaches us that our biggest upgrades often come wrapped in our deepest fears. They finally stop at a massive wooden door. One knock. Lucian's dark, heavy voice bleeds right through the wood, commanding them to enter. This study is a total flex of insane wealth. Giant bookshelves and chairs that cost more than Emma makes in a year. Lucian stares out the window, not even turning when he tells her to sit. Her ribs scream as she drops into the leather. He calmly notes that she is healing and Caleb is thriving. Emma swallows her pride and says thank you, but it tastes like poison. Lucian spins around, his face like cold stone, but his eyes are absolutely blazing. He warns her never to thank him. He leans on his desk, hiding the dangerous predator underneath. A harsh life lesson is that favors from the dark are never truly wiped clean. Then Lucian drops the ultimate hammer. He casually mentions he found the 3 guys who attacked her, and with a little motivation, they were extremely eager to talk. Emma blurts out, asking what he did to them. Lucian gives a hollow look and says he did what was necessary. Classic Mafia boss, right? He explains a rival named Viktor Krovic sent those goons to test his power. Emma is furious, accusing him of using her trauma just to protect his reputation. Lucian locks eyes with her, stating that any sign of weakness will destroy his empire. Emma grips her chair, insisting she is not his staff. Lucian shuts that down instantly. She is part of his world now. The ultimate life lesson here is that begging for safety often just traps you inside a prettier cage. Krovic knows her name. He knows about Caleb. If Emma walks away, she dies. To Lucian, keeping her protected and keeping her locked up are the exact same thing. So picture this. You and I are watching the wildest standoff right now. Emma is staring down Lucian, clutching her last shred of dignity. The guy literally tells her anger is good because it keeps her sharp. But, bro, she is straight up terrified. She yells about how she spent years building her independence to protect her brother Caleb, and this mafia boss just deleted it in 4 days. Lucian doesn't even blink, claiming he gave her safety. Emma calls it a prison. Lucian just hits back in that low, scary voice, saying it is a prison that keeps her breathing. She wants to run so bad, but she knows Caleb is finally safe here. Honestly, it is a harsh truth, but sometimes the very things that trap us are the only things keeping us alive. Love really is the ultimate cage. And just like that, the iron door of her cage clicks shut. She asks how long she has to stay, and Lucian goes totally silent. We are talking that heavy, super dark silence. Finally, he says she is stuck until he deals with his rival, Krovic. Emma is crying, telling him straight up that she hates him. But check out this lesson. Sometimes hate is the only bridge holding 2 broken people together. Lucian agrees, saying at least she will be alive to hate him. Suddenly, this massive dude with a huge scar busts in. Absolute buzzkill. He announces Krovic just robbed a shipment, dropped 6 guys, and stole $500,000. The room instantly gets freezing cold. Lucian asks when, and Scarface drops the bomb. 20 minutes ago, and he left a message. Scarface is sweating, totally scared to speak. Lucian clenches his fists and demands the message. The goon says Krovic warned that Emma was just the start, and Lucian has to choose between his huge criminal empire and his new pet. Bro, Emma is completely frozen. For 3 whole seconds, Lucian stops breathing. You know, a person's true colors always show when they are pushed to the absolute edge. Lucian snaps, grabs a heavy crystal paperweight, and fastballs it into the wall. It shatters like a total gunshot. He screams at the guy to get out, totally losing his cool. Emma tries to sneak away, but he calls her name. His back is turned, shaking with pure rage. He whispers that this ends when one of them is dead. Emma runs down the hall until her legs literally give out entirely. Emma slides down the fancy wall, her bruised ribs screaming, "Stick with me here, because we both know how awful it feels to carry guilt you do not actually deserve." 6 guys just lost their lives, simply because some punks cornered her in an alley. Now this massive underworld syndicate is tearing itself apart over a girl who used to mop floors. Lucian is plotting pure revenge just to keep her safe. Marcus eventually carries her to bed, but she is wide awake, haunted by Lucian snapping. Outside, Krovic is probably celebrating, while Lucian is literally sharpening his knives. Emma locks herself away for 2 whole days. Honestly, who could blame her? Sometimes stepping back is the absolute only way to protect your own fragile peace of mind. Fast forward to day 3, and Caleb rolls his wheelchair right into her room. He tells her she looks awful, which is zero chill, but he is just worried. Emma is staring at the city, totally numb. He demands to know what went down because he knows she is spiraling hard. She completely breaks down, crying that 6 guys died because of her and more are going to drop. But Caleb is not having this pity party. He grabs her hand and drops some heavy truth. He says those men died because they picked a fight with a mob boss, not because of her. It is a tough pill to swallow, but surviving a disaster does not mean you caused the massive storm. Feelings are not facts. Caleb tells her to let the huge monsters fight their own completely crazy battles for once. Emma is sitting there totally drowning in guilt. She thinks she is hiding, but Caleb calls her out, saying she needs to actually heal. She really wants to believe him, but every time she blinks, she sees Lucian promising total destruction. She whispers that they have to run away, but Caleb is like, run where? Back to the trashy apartment where the bad guys can easily end them. Back to working 3 awful jobs with broken ribs. He tells her straight up that their stubborn pride is going to get them flat out cancelled. He refuses to bite the dust just because they are too proud to accept help. He says they have to survive no matter what, and rolls out before she can even argue. Here is the real talk. Sometimes the strongest move you can make is letting someone else shield you. So Emma hangs by the window until noon, trying to dig up that fierce, angry energy she used to have after their mom passed away. But that fire is totally gone, leaving her feeling completely empty inside. Later on, she wanders around the massive mansion just to stretch her aching bones, and she accidentally finds the basement gym. A harsh light is spilling out of a cracked door. She definitely should have walked away, but she just freezes. The room is pure concrete and heavy metal. Right in the center, Lucian is absolutely wrecking a punching bag. The guy is shirtless, dripping sweat, and throwing punches like a total beast. We often try so hard to find the spark we lost, only to get totally hypnotized by a wild new fire that could easily burn our entire world down to ashes. Check this out. She spots this gnarly bullet scar on his shoulder. The dude is literally built pure for combat, like some kind of apex predator. He catches the heavy bag, and his dark eyes lock onto the door. Bam! Bam! He spots Emma. The silence in that room is so heavy you could literally cut it with a knife. He grabs a towel and walks right at her. Her brain is screaming at her to run, but she stays glued to the floor. He gets insanely close, smelling like fancy soap and pure danger. He growls that she has absolutely no business being down there. She tries to play it cool, saying she got lost. But he shuts that down, pointing out she is 3 floors away from her room. Look, people rarely wander aimlessly. We usually end up exactly where our deepest hidden desires want us to be. Emma grabs her bruised ribs and jokes that she is just really good at ending up where she shouldn't be. Bro, he actually looks a tiny bit amused. She knows picking a fight with this absolute madman is a terrible idea, but she stands her ground. He asks about her injuries, and she says she is healing. She even admits Caleb is getting better. Lucian just gives this single serious nod. The tension is absolutely insane. Then she brings up the stolen shipment and the guys who got taken out. Lucian's face turns to stone. He tells her she shouldn't know about that stuff. But come on, gossip spreads fast. She asks if this whole gang war is literally all about her. It takes crazy guts to ask if you are the root of a massive problem, and even more strength to face the real truth head on. Lucian gets right in her personal space, claiming Krovich is just a clown playing boss. He says she is just a handy excuse for them to start a turf war. She pushes him on what he is going to do next, but he hits her with the classic villain line. He will do whatever it takes. He tells her to get lost. And that is when Emma totally loses it. She marches right up to him. How is this not her business? Guys are dying because she exists. Lucian spins around, looking absolutely lethal, and asks if she really wants to hear the gory details of how he is going to end Krovic. She stands tall and says yes. She is so done being a clueless pawn. Ignorance might feel super safe for a minute, but dodging reality always ends up hurting way more than just facing the totally ugly facts head on. Let us pause and look at this together, because this is huge. He steps in so close, she literally has to look up just to meet his eyes. He insists she is not a pawn, but a wild card he cannot just fix with cash. Her voice gets super quiet, begging him to just let her and Caleb bounce. His fists clench up tight. He warns her that running away will not magically save her. Because she is linked to his name now, she has a massive target on her back forever. She claps back, asking if she is just property since he controls her whole life. His tough guy act completely drops. He whispers that he does not want to control her. He just wants to make sure she stays alive. We constantly mix up safety with captivity, forgetting that the strongest locks are built from desperate care. Picture this insane tension. Emma completely snapped, demanding to know why a massive mob boss cared about a maid who just scrubs floors. Lucian, this absolute unit of a boss, actually cracked. He tried to play the responsibility card, but she was not having it. Bro was so stressed, he literally begged her to go to her room. Hearing the word please from a guy like him proved he was losing it. Emma tossed and turned, her brain doing backflips because he looked at her like she was his entire world. Fast forward to 2 a.m, and total chaos erupted. Voices echoed down the hall, and Emma sneaked out to hear his crew officially calling for an all-out war. The truce was dead, because here is a hard truth. When a terrifying guy looks at you like you are his ultimate weakness, it is usually because you absolutely are. Let's break down this next scene together, because it is pure cinema. It is the middle of the night, and Emma is frozen in the hallway, completely panicking. Behind his study door, an older Mafia guy was literally pitching a trade to stop the gang war. The price? Hand over Emma. Lucian responded with a voice so ice-cold it dared them to finish that sentence. Suddenly, a massive crash of splintered wood completely shut down the debate. Lucian kicked them out, his voice shaking with pure, unfiltered rage. 3 mobsters scrambled out, looking totally terrified. As soon as they bailed, another huge crash blasted from the room. Emma should have run away right then and there. But honestly, sometimes the hardest life lesson we ever face is knowing exactly when to walk away from a wild storm and when you just have to step right into it. Emma stood her ground and knocked. Huge main character energy right there. Lucian yelled at her to get out, but completely froze the second he realized it was her. When she walked in, the room looked like a tornado hit it. Chairs were smashed and Lucian was standing by the window, fresh blood dripping off his knuckles. She straight up asked if he was going to sell her out to the rival mob. He locked onto her like a cornered beast, clocking the distance, swearing he would never trade her away. Emma hit back with a massive reality check, reminding him she was not his property. He stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes showing pure desperation. It is wild, but we often try to control the things we are most terrified of losing, totally forgetting that a human soul can never actually be owned. You can feel the angst here. Lucian knew Emma flinched whenever he walked in, treating him like a jailer. Then he dropped a massive truth bomb. He spent his whole life building an underground empire, but none of that flex mattered if he could not keep her safe. Emma tried to argue they barely knew each other, but Bro had receipts. He noticed how she worked herself to the bone to keep her sick brother alive. His bloody fists were shaking because he knew he caused this mess. When she asked why he cared, he basically admitted he would burn the entire city to the ground if anyone touched her. Listeners' love usually drops in without any logic at all. It is a terrifying moment when a total stranger turns into the only anchor holding your broken world together. The tension in that wrecked room was completely off the charts. Emma's brain was screaming at her to run away, but she ignored it. Instead, she grabbed this massive mafia boss by his bloody wrist. Pushing right past her panic, she demanded his first aid kit, brushing off his tough guy act. She cleared a spot on his desk and literally ordered the most feared man in the city to sit down. And guess what? He just listened. She stepped right between his knees to clean his cuts, warning him the medicine would sting. He just muttered that he was used to the pain, taking the burn without a single flinch. It proves that in the darkest chapters of our lives, real healing usually starts with one brave act of kindness toward the exact person we are most terrified of. Lucian was deadly silent, now staring at her with an intense look that made her hands shake. He whispered that she did not owe him anything, reminding her he was holding her hostage. But while patching him up, Emma dropped a massive plot twist. She told him he was not keeping her captive. He was the only reason she was still alive. The entire room just froze. A crazy mix of hope and sheer terror flashed across this mob boss's face. He quietly asked if there was even a difference anymore. Emma just held his bandaged hand, admitting she was still figuring it out. Then, so slowly, he reached up and gently brushed her jaw. We waste so much energy building walls to stay safe, never realizing the real tragedy is when those walls stop people from seeing our true hearts. His touch was incredibly gentle. He whispered that she should absolutely hate him, and she admitted she was trying her best to. Neither of them backed away. But just as things were getting deep, heavy footsteps completely wrecked the vibe. Emma jumped back as his top enforcer busted in. Instantly, Lucian's boss mode activated, locking his emotions away. The news was an absolute nightmare. The rival Mafia had just wiped out 8 of their guys. Even worse, they bombed a local cafe, putting innocent people in the hospital just to force Lucian into a sit-down. Emma felt sick to her stomach listening to this brutal casualty report. It proves that peace is totally an illusion. Sadly, the innocent are always the ones paying the highest price when powerful men decide to play their bitter games. Lucian froze. When he finally spoke, he sounded ready to end the world. He demanded the meeting happen at midnight, blowing off warnings that it was a blatant trap. His eyes went completely dead. Emma watched this guy she'd just patched up morph into an absolute weapon. She knew he was walking out to catch a body. When she panicked and asked what happens if he gets taken out, he casually dropped his backup plan. He had already set up cash, a safe house, and security for her and her brother. She snapped back that she did not care about his money, but he shut her down. He told her to lock her door and wait. Right before walking out, he asked for one last promise. It is deeply tragic when a man calculates his entire self-worth based entirely on the safety he can buy for the people he loves. Let's look at this piece by piece, shall we? His final demand was pure nightmare fuel. Lucian told her if the rival gang broke in, she had to fight like a demon, make it loud, make them bleed, just to survive. He got super close, begging her to do whatever it takes. She wanted to yell at him, but his haunted eyes proved he desperately needed to know. She would not give up. She whispered her promise. Once he left, she literally collapsed. The next day was pure agony. Emma hid with her brother, pretending everything was fine, while heavily armed guards locked down the mansion for a bloodbath. Sometimes the worst part of a tragedy is not the big fight itself. It is that suffocating silence while you sit around waiting for the war to finally kick down your front door. The tension finally broke around 6 p.m. Her little brother Caleb was shaking, knowing something huge was about to go down. Even the Mafia guards were sweating, which is a massive red flag. Emma finally admitted Lucian went to face the boss hunting them. When Caleb asked why the Don would risk his neck, she fed him a basic excuse about protecting civilians. She hid the insane reality that Lucian was walking into a death trap just to keep her safe. Caleb sounded so small when he asked if the boss was ever coming back. Emma squeezed his hand and admitted she had absolutely no clue. She promised they would survive like they always do, even though it felt like a total lie. Real courage is honestly just pretending you have a flawless master plan when your entire life is hanging by a single frayed thread. Stick with me here, because this is where it gets crazy. Emma was pacing her room, flinching at every noise. She kept gaslighting herself, saying he was just a toxic mobster who ruined her life. But the ache in her chest proved she was falling for him. Right before midnight, she sneaked down to the main hall just as he was descending the stairs. Bro was dressed in all black, looking like the literal Grim Reaper. He coldly ordered her to stay hidden. She nervously asked if he was bringing an army. Nope, just 4 guys. A massive flex, but small enough to avoid an instant bloodbath if the ambush triggered early. He walked right up to her, holding her gaze. Our minds will constantly build logical reasons to run away from a walking red flag, but a heavy heart always demands that you stay. Guys, picture this scenario. The absolute boss of the underworld, Lucian, is standing there talking about going down swinging for something real. Emma is practically having a panic attack, begging him to stop speaking like a total goner. This ruthless Mafia king actually goes soft, tucking her hair back and dropping the ultimate bombshell. He tells her she means way more to him than his entire criminal empire. He orders her to grab Caleb and bolt if things go south, saying the cash and passports are fully ready. Emma is gripping his wrist for dear life, demanding he survive this absolute suicide mission. You and I both know the deal here. Sometimes the real lesson is that true love is not about flashy, expensive gifts. It is the quiet, terrifying promise a guy makes right before he walks into an absolute bloodbath to keep you safe. So Lucian leans in, touching his forehead to hers, trying to hit her with the ultimate tragic goodbye, but Emma is absolutely not having it. She grabs his ridiculously expensive designer shirt and tells him if he dies, she will hate him for eternity. He lets out this bitter little laugh, saying that is barely a threat, but she tells him it is literally all she has left. Honestly, the lesson here is that when you are staring into total darkness, pure, stubborn hope is sometimes your best weapon. Outside, the getaway car engine starts revving up. He says he has to dip, but they are totally frozen. Then, boom, he crashes his lips onto hers. We are not talking about some soft fairy tale kiss here. This is raw, frantic survival mode mixed with pure panic. He promises he will make it back alive, and just like that, he ghosts into the night, leaving Emma standing completely alone. The car tires screech off into the dark, and you just know Lucian is walking straight into an absolute nightmare scenario. Emma locks herself in her room, completely paralyzed by the waiting game. The clock ticks from 1 in the morning to 2 to 3, and the suspense is literally agonizing. It reminds us of a harsh life lesson. We usually only figure out who our real ride or die is when we are terrified we might lose them forever. That gigantic luxury mansion suddenly feels like an empty grave. She is just praying that this mobster who somehow saved her soul makes it back in one piece. Then, right at 4:17 in the morning, absolute chaos erupts. Heavy combat boots are just smashing against the hardwood. Emma totally ignores her busted ribs, sprinting out to the massive foyer, only to freeze dead in her tracks. 4 massive mob enforcers are desperately dragging a 5th guy inside. That 5th guy? It is literally Lucian, and he is absolutely drenched in his own blood. Emma is about to pass out on the spot, just staring at the red puddle spreading all over the expensive white marble floor. But get this insane plot twist. He lifts his head, locks eyes with her, and actually flashes a smile. He mumbles that he kept his promise before his legs completely give out. Emma screams her lungs out as he hits the deck. She drops right into the mess, hands shaking over his totally wrecked chest. Here is the real lesson of the day. Pure loyalty shines the brightest when everything goes totally off the rails, and you are entirely helpless. She is frantically begging him to stay awake. She screams at his scarred security chief to get the medic. The guard swears the doctor is exactly 2 minutes out. But looking at this horrific scene, Emma knows Lucian is completely out of time. Emma is literally pressing her bare hands against his brutal wounds, trying to stop the bleeding, while screaming at the crew to explain what just went down. One of the battered muscle guys mutters that it was a total setup. They were facing insane 5-to-1 odds. Emma is absolutely freaking out, demanding to know why the boss would walk straight into a blatant trap. Lucian just gives her hand a weak squeeze and whispers that he had to end it once and for all. The harsh lesson here that sometimes the only way to find real peace is by walking directly into the absolute worst fire. She looks at his pale face, asking if the war is finally over. This crazy guy gives a terrifying grin and confirms he personally took out the rival mob boss. That should be good news, but Emma is just crying, wondering if the cost was his life. Suddenly, the giant front doors fly open, and the underworld doctor storms in. The doctor immediately demands they move him to the secret surgical room, yelling for 4 units of blood. Emma is shoved back as the crew tosses Lucian onto a stretcher. His grip slips from hers, leaving these intense red streaks all over her hands. But even half dead, he manages to croak out her name, begging her to stay. Come on, you and I are tracking this together. We totally know that gut-wrenching panic of losing the one person keeping you sane during a massive disaster. She snatches his hand right back, swearing she is not going anywhere. They sprint down these mansion hallways to a hidden operating room, literally built for underground mob secrets. The lesson here is realizing that some places are not homes at all. They are just fortresses hiding total darkness. The doctor completely blocks the double doors, telling her to back off. She is ready to throw down, but Lucian uses his last breath to beg her to wait outside. Emma is fully ready to bust through those doors, but the broken look in his eyes completely stops her. He is literally trying to protect her from seeing the gruesome surgery. She squeezes his freezing fingers one last time, aggressively demanding that he fights this and survives. He shuts his eyes and whispers that he will always return just for her. Boom. The heavy doors lock shut. Emma is left standing out there in the hall, staring at the dried blood on her hands while the whole world starts spinning. The scarred security guard walks up, quietly telling her she needs to sit down. Let us be real. The toughest lesson in life is learning that the absolute hardest battle is often just sitting helplessly while fate makes the call. She tries to play it tough, but she is violently shaking. The guard admits the knife wound hit deep, and internal bleeding is a huge risk, but swears his boss is way too stubborn to die. Her legs finally just quit. The guard introduces himself as Marcus, head of security, dropping a dark joke about how half the mob payroll is named Marcus. He gives her massive props for keeping pressure on the wound, saying she bought him extra time. Emma is staring at her stained hands, feeling completely useless. Marcus points out she did not crack under the pressure, which is massive in this world. She mutters she had awful practice watching her own mom pass away in hospital rooms. The brutal life lesson you and I can take from this is that trauma never actually fixes us. It just teaches us how to hide our absolute panic. Marcus totally agrees, saying you never get used to the blood, you just level up your acting skills. The hours are painfully dragging by, filled with cold coffee and fake comfort. Then, right around sunrise, the intense silence finally breaks when Caleb rolls up. Caleb looks like an absolute ghost when he arrives. Emma grabs her brother, buries her face into his shoulder, and completely loses it. She is sobbing so hard, her busted ribs are screaming in pain, but she cannot stop. Caleb just holds on to her. We all have to learn the simple lesson that sometimes words are totally useless when someone's soul is shattering into a million pieces. Once she finally breathes, she drops the intel about the massive mob ambush. Caleb just squeezes her shaking hand, locking in to wait it out. Outside, the city is totally clueless that an underground king is fighting death purely because he refused to let go of his girl. Then, exactly at 9:47, those giant doors swing open. Emma bolts upright. The doctor steps out looking absolutely trashed in his bloody scrubs, but drops the biggest plot twist of the morning. Lucian is alive and stable. The brutal blade somehow missed his vitals by mere centimeters. Emma's legs literally give out from the insane wave of pure relief. The doctor gives her a strict 5-minute warning, and she sneaks into this intense room reeking of heavy medical chemicals. Guys, seeing Lucian like this is a massive shock to the system. Without his intimidating Mafia armor, he is totally fragile, hooked up to a ton of beeping monitors. It is wild to see the most dangerous guy in the city looking completely mortal. She pulls up a chair, pressing his hand against her face. She calls him an absolute lunatic, but softly thanks him for surviving the war. His fingers actually twitch. The big life lesson to take away: a true, hardcore connection easily cuts straight through a coma. No security comes to drag her away, and eventually, pure exhaustion knocks her out cold right there on the bed. Hours pass by. Suddenly, she jolts totally awake with a massive stiff neck, only to realize warm fingers are very slowly running through her hair. Set the scene here. It is late afternoon, and the room has this creepy, cold gray vibe. But boom, Lucian is totally awake, and his eyes are staring right through her. He croaks out a quick hello, and Emma's throat instantly tightens. She straight up tells him he looks like absolute garbage. He actually smirks, whispering that he feels even worse. He reaches up, touching her face, asking how long he was out. 18 hours. The doctor said he was crazy lucky, but Emma is furious. She calls him out on his insane stunt, fighting 4 dudes in a trap. His expression goes totally cold. He tells her he would rather take a bullet than let anyone touch her. You and I are wrapping up this ride, but remember the final lesson. Sometimes we show the most anger toward the exact people we are absolutely terrified of losing forever. His thumb wipes away her tears, and all her rage just completely evaporates into thin air. Let us kick this off, because the tension is absolutely off the charts. Emma presses her forehead against Lucian's, dodging tangled medical tubes like we are in a tragic romance. She whispers for him not to pull a stunt like that again, but Lucian just promises he will try to survive. He slides a warm hand to her neck and drops the ultimate bomb. She matters way more to him than his entire underground empire. Just as her breath hitches, the door flies open. Marcus stands there, looking like a stone wall. The rival crew is demanding a sit-down, and they say it is about Emma. The room instantly freezes. Ignoring his brutal injuries, Lucian fights to sit up. The enemy is threatening to leak her darkest secrets if he does not meet them. The lesson here is simple. No matter how much power you build, your greatest vulnerability will always be the people you let into your heart. Emma is turning pale, cold nausea hitting her like a freight train. What kind of dirt could they possibly have? Lucian is not waiting around to find out. He swings his legs over the mattress, completely ghosting the panicked doctor trying to stop him. He barks out orders to set the meeting in 2 hours and double the security. Fast forward 30 minutes, and our boss is fully dressed and strapped with weapons, totally ignoring the furious medical staff. Emma watches from the corner, seeing how he favors his left side to hide the agonizing pain. She begs him not to go, but he racks his handgun with terrifying, ice-cold precision. He swears he will put a bullet in anyone who threatens her, and, if his body gives out, Marcus will finish the job. It just goes to show that true loyalty means showing up for the fight, even when you are completely broken inside. Lucian holsters his weapon and tells her to stay locked in the room, but Emma is not having it. She crosses her arms and straight up refuses. She is totally done hiding while he bleeds for her, and she refuses to be treated like some fragile doll. If the enemy knows her secrets, she demands to hear them. They are locked in this intense stare down until Lucian finally cracks with a heavy sigh. He compromises, telling her she stays in the armored car with the guards and she only comes inside if he calls. He makes her swear to run if things go south. Emma grips his hand, feeling the crazy tremors he is trying so desperately to hide. Ignoring his screaming wounds, he pulls her in for a desperate kiss on the forehead. The takeaway here is clear. You cannot shield the people you love from the truth forever, no matter how hard you try. You and I have to look at this insane setup together. The meeting goes down at a rotting warehouse, exactly the kind of creepy spot where enemies just vanish. Emma sits in an armored truck, wedged between 2 guards built like brick walls. Through the tinted glass, she watches Lucian stride toward the doors, looking absolutely untouchable, though she catches his subtle limp. The dark building swallows him whole, and the weight becomes pure torture. 10 minutes pass, then 12. Suddenly, her phone buzzes. An unknown number. The text is a literal nightmare, demanding she come inside alone or her brother dies. She thinks it is a bluff since Caleb is safe at the estate. But a second message pops up, and the sickening reality hits her. Life teaches us that the exact moment you think your loved ones are perfectly safe, that is exactly when the enemy decides to strike. A photo loads on her screen, and Emma's entire world shatters into pieces. It is Caleb, trapped in his wheelchair with cold steel pressed right against his temple. You know that kind of absolute terror that deafens you? She is feeling it, but her voice is dead calm when she tells the muscle she is going in. The guard shakes his head, citing strict orders, so Emma shoves the phone right into his chest. She snaps that they have her brother, threatening to scream until every cop in a 5-mile radius swarms the place. The guy hesitates, does a quick radio check, and finally gives the nod to trail her. Emma does not even waste a single breath. She bolts toward that rusted warehouse, slamming into the broken doors and totally ignoring her own brutal injuries. The lesson is simple. Sometimes you have absolutely no choice but to walk straight into the fire to save your family. This warehouse is a massive cavern with flickering lights, making it look like a horror movie. Lucian and Marcus are trapped in the center, surrounded by a dozen armed thugs. And right there, with a gun barrel to his skull, sits Caleb. Lucian screams for Emma to run, his voice echoing off the concrete. But a guy in a flashy suit steps out of the shadows, mocking her and calling it a sweet family reunion. Emma clenches her fists, literally begging the guy to take her instead. The suit just shakes his head. He drops a crazy plot twist, revealing that her previous beating was actually a deep investigation. He stares right into her soul, telling her he knows she is just a cleaner now, but he also knows the ghost she was before her mother died. Emma's blood runs ice cold. It is a harsh reality check for all of us. No matter how fast you run, your dark past will always catch up. Emma tries to play dumb, but the suit just hits her with this evil smirk. He takes a slow walk down memory lane, talking about how 15 years ago in Ohio, a rich businessman died in a fire. Everyone called it a tragic accident. The guy pauses for dramatic effect, letting the silence get super heavy. Then he drops the ultimate bombshell. It was no accident. The room starts spinning for Emma as he lays it all out. He claims Emma was only 9 years old when she struck the match, seeking revenge for her discarded mother. He even flashes an old newspaper clipping. Emma weakly denies it, but the guy points straight at Caleb, exposing the mismatched birth records and decades of insane lies. Caleb looks at his sister with pure, raw betrayal. It proves that the absolute heaviest burdens in this world are always the toxic secrets we keep from the people who matter the most. Caleb is shaking, his voice super small, as he asks his sister what Psycho is talking about. Emma cannot even breathe. She desperately tries to say she can explain, but the stranger shouts over her, declaring to the whole room that she burned a man alive. The silence in that warehouse is absolutely deafening. Lucian is just staring at her with hollow, devastating shock. He begs her to tell him it is a lie. Emma opens her mouth, but the words just die, because every single word is the raw truth. She whispers that she was only 9 and the guy was brutally beating her mother. The suit cuts her off, coldly pointing out that setting fires in 3 places is totally premeditated. He calls her a monster, playing the victim, until Lucian finally snaps and yells for the guy to shut up. It is a grim reminder that just one moment of blind rage can redefine your entire existence. Lucian tries to brush off her past, but the enemy just lets out this toxic laugh. He reveals his master plan. He has a prosecutor lined up to reopen the case, and the hard evidence to prove Emma is a wanted fugitive. The blackmail is crazy. He wants a 50% stake in Lucian's empire. If Lucian hands over the territory, Emma's history magically vanishes. But if he refuses, Emma goes down for murder, Caleb goes to the system, and Lucian's world burns. The choice is completely suffocating. Emma is literally gripping a rusted pole just to keep from collapsing. 15 years of running, trying to scrub the smell of smoke from her hands, and it is all crashing down. Her voice breaks as she begs Lucian not to give in. We learn here that you can build a beautiful new life on a hidden past, but eventually, that fragile foundation is always going to crack and shatter. You and I can feel the heartbreak here, Let him turn me in, she pleads, her spirit completely crushed. But Lucian ignores all the guns pointed at him and steps right toward her. He tells her he cares and demands she look at him. Emma is terrified she is going to see disgust in his eyes. But when she finally looks up, no revulsion at all. Just a man desperately trying to save a girl who feels beyond saving. He quietly asks for the real story. Emma nods, choking on old tears, and the awful truth spills out. The guy was beating her mom to death, and as a powerless kid, she just wanted to scare him. She lit matches in the corners, but the fire spread way too fast while he was passed out drunk. She remembers the exact second she realized she became the monster. It is a tragic lesson. When you try to burn down your own demons, you usually end up catching fire yourself. You were 9 years old and you survived, Lucian tells her, his voice absolute steel. He turns his deadly glare back to the guy holding Caleb hostage, declaring her survival is all that matters. Then, our guy drops the coldest ultimatum. Let the boy go, burn the files, and you get to walk out breathing. The suit just laughs, mocking his crumbling empire. But Lucian's hand goes straight to his holster. No, Lucian replies, you are here to die. Instantly, it is absolute chaos. Marcus and the guards raise their weapons. The stranger jams his gun harder into Caleb's head, but Lucian's aim does not even flinch. He swears that if that trigger is pulled, every single person in this warehouse is going to hell. It is the ultimate standoff, with everyone frozen in pure terror. Emma suddenly realizes the hardest truth. Protecting your family means making the brutal sacrifice nobody else is willing to make. Look at this absolute madness. Emma completely full sends it, sprinting straight at Caleb, and that loaded weapon, totally ready to eat a bullet. Lucian lets out a gut-wrenching scream. She grabs her brother's wheelchair, ripping it out of the way with insane strength. The shooter panics, swinging his piece wildly, and a single shot completely shatters the room. At first, she doesn't even feel the agony, just a heavy pressure before hitting the concrete. Absolute chaos explodes. Emma stares at the flickering lights, wondering why her side is freezing over. Lucian drops to his knees, utterly terrified, begging her not to clock out. But here is the thing about real sacrifice. It never gives you a warning. It just happens in that quiet, split-second space between heartbeats. The chaos of the warehouse fades into static. She hears Caleb losing it and feels frantic Lucian frantically tromping against her wrecked chest, crying that she doesn't get to pull a sacrifice play on him. But it is totally lights out. When she finally respawns, it is pure agony. Every breath feels like inhaling literal broken glass. A chill doctor tells her not to panic, explaining the bullet completely collapsed her lung, and she is wildly lucky to not be in a body bag. Staring up at the hospital ceiling, she only cares about one thing. She forces out a rough whisper, asking for Caleb, and the doc promises the kid is perfectly safe. Let's take a closer look at what that means, guys. At the end of the day, true love always finds a way to pull us right back from the absolute edge. The doctor casually mentions she saved the day, and boom, the memories absolutely flood her brain. The warehouse, that deafening gunshot, sprinting right into the jaws of the Grim Reaper. She totally panics, trying to sit up and desperately asking for Lucian. The doc pushes her down, dropping an insane truth bomb. Lucian is out there right now, permanently deleting anyone who ever saw her file. Emma feels completely sick, finding out they lost 7 guys just to keep her breathing. Then a heavy voice drops from the doorway. Lucian is standing right there, looking like he aged a whole decade in one night. His clothes are still caked in her dried blood, and his dark eyes look completely haunted. It just goes to show, The absolute heaviest burdens we carry are always the ones we pick up to protect the people we care about the most. Lucian tells the doctor to kick rocks, and the guy completely vanishes. He drags himself over to her bed, sitting down across a gap that feels like a literal ocean. Then he drops the hammer, calling her out for lying to his face. Emma is completely busted. He lays it out, how she spent 15 years dodging a murder rap while letting him start a massive turf war. He asks if she would have even helped him if she knew the truth, and she admits she has no idea. Lucian just breaks, his face twisting with pure rage and heartbreak. He realizes she was just a 9-year-old kid, doing whatever it took to shield her mom from a monster. She cries that it does not excuse her actions, but he just stares right at her. Sometimes we judge people for their darkest secrets before realizing they were just surviving the only way they knew how. Now Lucian is pacing the room like a cornered beast. He is fuming because she built this ghost identity, and now he is scrubbing blood off his own hands to cover for her. Emma is absolutely sobbing, whispering that she will just disappear forever. But that sets him off worse. He whips around heated, telling her he does not care about what she did 15 years ago. He is furious because she kept him in the dark while he was literally falling for her. Imagine that plot twist. He caught feelings against every single survival instinct he has. He burned alliances, started a war, and dropped bodies. And the craziest part? He would do it again. It reminds us that real loyalty is just finding someone whose mess you are completely willing to clean up. Emma is completely shattered, crying out that she is a literal murderer. But Lucian is not having it. He drops to her eye level and fiercely corrects her, calling her a survivor who carried an insane burden and stayed on her feet. She tells him he should walk away, but he wipes her tear and says he is entirely locked in. When she panics about the evidence, his voice turns ice. He wiped it all. Every file, every rat erased from existence. She asks the body count, and he admits it took 3 lives to secure her freedom. Emma is gutted, whispering she is not worth that kind of bloodshed. You and I are going to look at this together and realize something wild. True love in this underworld does not care about keeping a clean record, but it will always demand a brutal, unforgiving price. He leans in closer, resting his forehead against hers, promising she is worth every drop of blood. He lays it out straight. He cannot keep fighting if she keeps throwing herself into the line of fire. Emma fiercely defends herself, claiming she was protecting Caleb. But Lucian is livid, calling her reckless stunt a fancy form of suicide. He pulls back, his eyes completely blazing. For 15 years, she has been running, totally terrified of letting anyone see her. The second things got hot, she tried to check out early to avoid the emotional baggage. Emma hates hearing it, but he totally shatters her walls. She would rather catch a bullet than ask for help. It is a harsh truth for all of us. Sometimes the hardest pill to swallow is realizing our boldest moves are just masks for our deepest fears. Lucian stands there with his fists clenched, staring her down. You can hear the pure frustration in his voice, the kind that only hits when you deeply care about someone. He begs her to understand they can fight this war as a team, instead of her pulling solo hero moves that put her in a hospital bed. Emma instinctively wants to build up her usual icy walls, but she is completely burnt out from playing survival games. She whispers that she is so incredibly tired of running. Lucian drops to his knees right next to her, locking those intense eyes onto hers. He tells her to just stop running, and stop trying to carry the weight of the entire world on her shoulders alone. Because honestly, Sometimes it's the absolute bravest thing a person can do in this life is simply step back and allow themselves to be supported. He really needs her to see that dropping her guard is not a massive failure. Taking a hit to shield someone else requires way more spine than just destroying your enemies. Emma looks at this hardened boss through completely blurred vision. He literally went to war and spilled blood for her, offering the unconditional loyalty she never thought she deserved. She finally admits her biggest fear. She is terrified he will wake up and realize she is just a scared kid who made colossal mistakes. But Lucien pulls her against his chest and vows he is absolutely never leaving. Right then Emma completely crumbles. Massive, painful sobs tear through her broken ribs, but it is exactly what she needed. We all hit that boiling point where we just need to completely shatter so we can finally start putting the pieces back together. When the tears stop, she looks up at him, asking what their next move is. Lucien is surprisingly gentle, brushing the messy hair from her face, and tells her the only mission right now is healing. He swears she and Caleb are completely off the radar. They will handle the massive fallout when she is back on her feet. Even if her brother flips out over the lies, Emma just nods, burying her face in his chest, desperately wanting to believe this ceasefire is legit. Outside that window, the cold morning sun is finally rising over the skyline, hitting these two people who are linked to each other like absolute life rafts. Right here, in this quiet room, her heart is beating with a totally new rhythm, because even in our absolute darkest chapters, we still deeply deserve to see the morning sun. Emma totally leans into the steady rhythm of his breathing, thanking him for not walking out on her. His arms wrap around her tighter, acting like an anchor in this insane storm. He mutters that she is officially stuck with him now. For the first time in her crazy life, being trapped does not make her want to bolt. Giving up control suddenly feels exactly like freedom. The steady beeping of the monitor drags her into sleep, and she finally stops fighting. The crash. Just as she is fading out, he drops the ultimate bombshell, telling her he loves her, regardless of her sketchy past. She wants to say it back, but exhaustion knocks her out. It is a beautiful reminder that true love never judges the person we used to be. But of course, the universe hates peace, and the brutal sound of shattering glass absolutely destroys the morning. Stick with me, guys, because this is where everything hits the fan. That cozy illusion of safety is completely obliterated. Emma's eyes snap open as white-hot pain tears through her damaged lungs. The recovery room is pitch black, except for eerie moonlight reflecting off the broken glass. The clock glows 3:47 in the morning, somewhere deep inside the compound. A blood-curdling scream echoes. She forces herself to sit up, her body screaming in protest. Suddenly, the door kicks open and Marcus bolts inside, gripping a heavy pistol. He warns them it is a code red. Kravik's heavily armed hit squad is breaching the property, and 20 goons are rushing straight for her. Ice floods her veins as he pulls her up. When danger comes knocking, in the absolute dead of night, you quickly find out exactly what your survival instincts are truly made of. Marcus is practically dragging Emma down a pitch-black hallway. Every step is pure agony on her shattered ribs, but survival instincts kick in. Heavy combat boots hammer up the stairs right behind them. They whip around a corner and nearly slam into two armed goons. Before Emma can even blink, Marcus raises his weapon and drops them both with two deafening shots. He violently shoves her away, screaming at her to run. He shouts the safe room code, ordering her to lock herself inside and wait for Lucien's then. Then this absolute legend turns back to hold the line, stepping directly into the path of certain death just to buy her a little time. The real lesson here: true loyalty is never proven in the easy moments. It is proven the very second someone willingly stands between you and a roaring fire. Emma collapses through that heavy door, hands shaking so badly she can barely punch the keypad. The massive steel locks slam shut. Inside this freezing bunker lit by glowing security feeds sit Caleb and Clara, pale with terror. Caleb's voice cracks as he asks what is happening. Emma leans against the cold wall, promising this room is built to survive anything. Right on cue, an explosion rocks across the estate. On the monitors, the east wing vanishes into a roaring wall of fire. Clara covers her mouth in pure horror. Emma frantically scans the camera feeds until she spots Lucian on the third floor. He is trapped, but returning fire with brutal precision. You and I both know that watching the people we love fight our battles from afar is just the heaviest, most helpless burden anyone can carry. Emma stands completely frozen, staring at the screens. Every shot Lucian takes is calculated, but the numbers are overwhelming. Caleb wheels his chair up, screaming that they cannot just sit there while their people get slaughtered. Emma grips the desk, arguing that going out there is a literal death sentence. She can barely stand, and he is in a wheelchair. Caleb shoots her a look of pure betrayal, accusing her of just watching people die for them. That stings because it is completely true. On the flickering monitor, Lucian is pushed back toward the grand staircase, his shirt soaked in blood. He is rapidly running out of ground. The hardest pill to swallow in this life is that sometimes survival means you have to stay put while other people pay the ultimate bloody price for your safety. The air in that room feels impossibly thin. You know that feeling, right? When terror wraps its hands around your throat. Emma can only focus on one brutal truth. If she stays hiding, Lucian is a dead man. Her eyes lock onto the weapons cabinet. Clara tries to talk her down, but Emma is already moving. She grabs a heavy chair and smashes the lock to pieces, revealing enough firepower for a small war. Caleb begs her to stop, terrified she will die. She grabs a handgun, checking the magazine, praying she remembers how it works. She flat out refuses to cower anymore. The bravest thing we can ever do in this life is refuse to let the people we care about fight alone. Caleb sees that absolute fire in her eyes, and right then, he decides he is coming with her. Caleb pushes his wheelchair forward, his jaw locked. She tries to block him, but he is done taking orders. His next words hit her like a freight train. He knows absolutely everything. The fire, the fact that she committed a murder at 9 years old, and all the years she spent running. Tears stream down his face. He isn't mad about what she did. He's furious. She carried that agonizing weight alone. She claimed she was protecting him, but Caleb sees right through it. She was just terrified to admit she was broken. The hard lesson here is that hiding our deepest wounds from our loved ones never keeps them safe. It just leaves everyone feeling totally isolated. Emma slowly slides down the steel cabinet. She has nothing left to hide. He is right. Emma accepts his truth, but the grim reality remains. Caleb cannot walk, and wheeling into a crossfire is a literal death sentence. Yet Caleb grabs a handgun, declaring that family always watches each other's backs. Emma used to face the wolves alone, but today she is done pretending she doesn't need help. She preps his weapon, ordering him to stay behind her. Clara pleads from the corner, terrified they are rolling into their graves. Emma simply checks her magazine. If they go down swinging. The lesson is simple. Accepting help doesn't make you weak, it gives you the absolute strength to step right into the fire. She pushes the heavy door open. The hallway is entirely choked with thick smoke and echoing gunfire. She looks back at Caleb and tells him to stay close. They slip into the corridor, Caleb wheeling quietly through the shadows. They move like ghosts through the smoke, dodging armed hitmen. Emma has to physically stop Caleb from checking a fallen guard's pulse. The mansion is a complete war zone. Walls are chewed by bullets, and fire eats the wings. Suddenly, the surgical wound on Emma's side violently tears open. She feels hot blood soaking her shirt, but she refuses to stop. Sometimes, intense pain is just a brutal reminder that you are still alive enough to keep fighting. They creep to the grand staircase and peek over. Down in the foyer, Lucian and 3 guards are trapped in a desperate defensive circle. They are totally surrounded, running dry on ammo, firing with that agonizing hesitation of men who know the end is here. Caleb whispers they need a distraction. Emma's eyes lock onto the massive chandelier above the foyer. The chain looks severely damaged. She asks if he can make the shot. Caleb steadies his arm against his wheelchair, breathes, and fires as he misses by inches. Instantly, every hostile goon snaps their aim toward the balcony. Emma violently yanks his chair backward as the air fills with lead. Bullets chew the marble, missing her by a whisper. You and I both know when a wild plan falls apart. You never freeze, you move. She drags Caleb behind a thick column as the space disintegrates. Slicing through the roaring gunfire, she hears Lucian. The absolute madman broke his defensive circle and is fighting his way up the grumbling stairs. Covered in blood, he is coming right for her. Lucian moves sluggishly, weighed down by exhaustion, but his eyes lock onto Emma with insane intensity. Knowing he would die trying to reach the top, Emma steps out from the column, raises her weapon, and opens fire. The brutal recoil nearly knocks her flat. Her lungs scream, but she pulls the trigger until the chamber clicks empty. It buys him just enough time. Lucian closes the gap, violently shoving her behind the pillar and using his body as a shield. He demands to know what she is doing, his voice cracking with absolute terror. True devotion is stepping into the line of fire for someone else, even when it defies logic. Emma just touches his bruised face, sarcastically pointing out that since he was supposed to stay safely alive, they are both deeply disappointing each other today. A broken laugh rips from Lucian's throat. He pulls her in for a desperate kiss, tasting of blood, bitter ash, and the terrifying reality they might die any second. He confesses his love, followed by how furiously angry he is that she risked her life. Emma just smiles, fumbling to reload. Lucian peeks around the column, deciding they will make a mad dash for the garage. He is leaving the mansion to burn. Emma is stunned. This place was the foundation of his entire empire. But Lucian doesn't hesitate. He swears he would let his whole world turn to ash if it meant keeping her breathing. We often learn what truly matters only when everything else is violently stripped away. Grabbing Caleb's wheelchair, they bolt out from their cover into the chaotic crossfire. Lucian pushes Caleb's chair with one arm, firing with the other. Emma sprints alongside, blindly shooting to hold the hitman back. They tear past the rooms where Emma once mopped floors as an invisible ghost in his empire. The steel garage door looms ahead. Suddenly, Marcus materializes from the smoke. Bleeding from a severe head wound, he plants his feet and unleashes a wall of suppressing fire. Lucian punches the code, shoving Caleb and Emma inside. He screams for Marcus to follow, but as Marcus turns, a bullet catches him right in the spine. He collapses, completely still. Emma screams, fighting to run back into the crossfire, but Lucian grabs her. He violently drags her inside and slams the heavy door shut. The deadbolt engages with the cold finality of a tomb. Guys, look at this absolute chaos. Emma is literally losing her mind, screaming at Lucian not to leave Marcus behind. But Lucian, zero chill. He knows going back just means adding their own bodies to the pile. You and I can probably agree that the hardest part of surviving a hit is choosing who gets left in the dirt. Emma is totally shook, but Lucian is already tossing Caleb into the armored truck. As they pull out, she looks in the mirror and sees his entire empire going up in massive flames. She is crying, but the boss just grips the wheel tight. Here is life lessons. Sometimes you have to let your whole castle burn to the ground just to keep your family breathing. Money does not matter when you are dead. He floors the gas, and boom, the place blows up. The engine is roaring as Emma watches this crazy mansion turn into an ashtray. In the back, Caleb is freaking out, asking where they are even going. Lucian rips the wheel around a sharp corner and drops the hardest line. They are hitting a Brooklyn safe house, because if the enemy wants a war, they get a total bloodbath. But here is the most insane plot twist, guys. The big bad who just ordered this massive hit on Lucian, it is the exact same boss who took him in off the streets and raised him. He literally taught him everything. The ultimate life lesson here is that the most fatal backstabs never come from random haters. The worst snakebites always come from the exact people who taught you how to survive. Now, the boss is gearing up for pure, unhinged revenge. The Manhattan streets are flying by, and the vibe inside this truck is completely dark. Emma is totally glitching out. The mansion is toast, Marcus is out of the picture, and the city is about to get wrecked. But Lucian, the man, has totally flipped the switch. He straight up tells her that you do not walk away from a mob hit like this. You either strike back with massive force, or you end up 6 feet under. Emma looks at him and realizes the sweet guy she thought she knew is gone. In his place is a ruthless mob boss, ready to drown the streets in blood. It goes to show a very harsh life lesson. People show you exactly who they really are when their back is against the wall, and you had better believe them the first time. The revenge arc begins right now. Emma whispers that she wants zero part in this upcoming slaughter, but Lucian looks at her with absolute ice in his veins and drops a massive ultimatum. He tells her they are about to plot the total wipeout of everyone who crossed them. If she cannot handle mob justice, she needs to bounce right now. He promises to keep her safe, but he is not apologizing for being a savage. He tells her to wake up and stop pretending he is a hero because he runs a literal criminal empire. Honestly, the life lesson here is pretty heavy. Sometimes surviving means tossing your perfect morals out the window and teaming up with the monster in the room. Despite being totally terrified, Emma actually leans into his touch. She knows he is insanely dangerous, but she is locking in and staying anyway. They are parked in this sketchy garage, and the tension is insane. Emma briefly thinks about grabbing Caleb and pulling a vanishing act to find a normal life. But let us be real. Normal is a complete myth. Her innocence checked out when she caught her first body at 9 years old. Lucian, even with his massive villain energy, is the only dude who saw her trauma and stayed. You and I both know the real life lesson here. Stop chasing a fake perfect life and value the people who hold you down when things get ugly. She grabs his hand and confirms she is not running away. But she begs the mob boss for one favor. When the smoke finally clears and the enemies are packed up, she wants him to try building a life that does not revolve around constant murder. Lucian clenches his jaw and drops a single nod. He will try. It is bare minimum energy, but Emma knows it is the best deal she is getting today. They hop out of the truck, rolling Caleb down these creepy hallways into room 304. Inside this freezing safe house, 3 surviving squad members are waiting, and their eyes are straight up screaming for payback. The veteran of the group drops the battle stats. They lost 8 members, but managed to flatline 16 enemy goons before the mansion burned. The physical base is totally wrecked. But here is a major life lesson. Always keep a backup plan. The boss had all the syndicate money and tech completely secured off the grid. Their financial war chest is fully loaded, and they are ready to buy a whole lot of revenge. Lucian steps up to the glowing screens, looking like an absolute raid boss. He drops the craziest counterattack strategy ever. They are going to blitz every single warehouse, club, and stash house the enemy owns all at once. 0 is survivors. Emma is panicking, warning him that innocent workers will get caught in the massive crossfire. But Lucian does not blink. In his icy world, there are no bystanders, only winners, and the people getting zipped up in body bags. A harsh life lesson to remember is that in the pursuit of ultimate revenge, collateral damage is always part of the receipt. Emma looks at Caleb, who is white-knuckling his wheelchair in total shock. They have officially crossed the point of no return into a pitch-black tunnel, and she desperately needs to step out and find some air. Emma tries to run, but Lucian grabs her wrist. He looks at her panicked face, realizes she is about to crash, and lets go, shoving a burner phone into her hand. Emma scrambles up to the roof, her legs giving out the second the cool air hits. She slumps against the ledge, staring at the skyline. Her house is ash, Marcus is dead, and a mob war is starting just because she exists. Then, the heavy door pops open. It is Caleb, rolling out into the chill to sit beside her. You and I know how it goes. We all need an anchor when the world spins out of control, right? A powerful life lesson is that hitting rock bottom shows you exactly who will sit with you in the dark. The beautiful sunrise is starting to light up the sky, but it feels like a sick joke compared to the insane bloodbath they just survived. Emma is fully breaking down, apologizing for the lies and the insane mob drama she dragged him into. But Caleb, the guy, is an absolute rock. He grabs her hand and reminds her they have been a duo since day one. He looks over the city and drops some massive truth. Sure, they probably deserve a chill life, but this violent reality is all they have left. He says he would rather dodge bullets with her than be safe and totally alone. It is a huge life lesson right there. Surviving another day with your family matters way more than holding onto foolish pride. He reminds her she literally saved his life tonight. Emma tries to argue that Lucian is starting an all-out war, but Caleb does not flinch. He heard the exact same briefing. He completely understands the brutal math of the Mafia, and he is locked in. Listen up, because Caleb is spitting absolute facts. He looks Emma dead in the eye and says the hitmen will never stop hunting them unless they are permanently deleted. It does not make the massive violence right. It just makes it completely necessary. He refuses to judge Lucian for doing whatever it takes to keep their squad breathing. But Emma is running on literal fumes. Her wounds are bleeding and she is burnt out. She admits she has no idea how to accept this endless loop of Mafia death. Caleb squeezes her hand and drops a top-tier life lesson. He tells her not to accept it, just survive it. Get through the hurricane now, and maybe she can help pull the boss out of his villain era later. She has beaten impossible odds for 15 years straight. What is one more crazy boss fight at this point? Life almost never gives us perfect choices. Sometimes the biggest life lesson is realizing you have to walk straight through literal hellfire to protect your people. The morning sun is hitting the city, and Emma finally locks in. She takes a deep breath, makes her ultimate choice, and wheels Caleb right down into the Mafia war room. Lucian looks up, and with zero shaking in her voice, Emma says she is officially in. She will do whatever it takes to end this enemy faction and keep her family alive. Lucian pulls her close, kissing her temple, but warns her that things are about to get unbelievably ugly. She already knows. Standing beside the mob boss, looking at the digital hit list, Emma feels the absolute last innocent piece of her soul pack its bags and leave the chat forever. She is going full dark mode. Picture this with me, guys. The Manhattan sunrise is bleeding red across the safe house walls. The scared girl who spent 15 years running is gone, replaced by a boss queen holding her ground. For 3 straight days, Lucian turns the criminal underworld into a literal horror movie. He is tearing the rival empire apart. Emma is glued to the monitors, watching it all unfold. Day 1, 6 warehouses burned and 17 enemies dropped. Day 2, they hacked the offshore accounts, froze the cash, and flatlined 23 more goons. The craziest part? Not a single scratch on Lucian's squad. By day 3, the enemy is completely wiped out. Here is the final life lesson. Sometimes, to finally stop running from your demons, you have to stand your ground and just let the bridges burn to ash. Picture this. 4 a.m, the last loyalist goons are boxed into a Bronx apartment. You and I know that heavy silence right before everything hits the fan. Emma watches Lucian strap on his tactical vest, checking his weapons with chilling focus. She whispers, begging him to let his crew handle the messy cleanup. But Lucian just holsters his gun. This is a brutal message. Anyone who threatens his world dies by his hand. She reminds him of his promise to find a peaceful way out. He steps close, cupping her face with hands that have taken so many lives. For him, the only exit is total elimination. It is a tragic reality check. The massive walls we build to keep our loved ones safe often end up trapping them in the dark right alongside us. Emma is shaking, her voice trembling as she tells him that is absolutely not what she meant. Lucian knows. His rough thumb gently traces her cheekbone. In his twisted mind, the only way to keep her breathing is absolute annihilation of his rivals. Emma is choking on dread, terrified of losing him to the bloodshed. He presses his forehead to hers, swearing he will never leave. But Emma sees the writing on the wall. Someone always hits back harder. She's already picturing herself at his grave. Gripping his vest, she begs him to walk away now that the enemy empire is in ashes. But his eyes go dark with fear. If one enemy survives, they return. The hardest lesson here is knowing when a war is actually over, before the endless fight destroys the very thing you swore to protect. Lucian grips her shoulders, terrified the next hit will take her away forever. He refuses to risk it, but Emma pushes back hard, asking where it all ends. You bury one enemy and another pops up. She warns him he will become a cold-blooded body count, leaving her to watch his humanity rot away. He promises it stops when she is safe, but safety in the mob is a myth. Emma breaks down, crying that she will never be safe while he lives in the shadows. There is always another target on their backs. She clings to him, pleading with him to choose love over his relentless vendetta. Let his enforcers finish the job. She needs him alive and whole. We often forget that true power is not burning the whole city down. It is having the guts to finally drop your guns and walk away. Emma whispers through her tears, begging him to prove he is tough enough to stop. A brutal war is raging behind Lucian's eyes. His feral need for revenge clashes against his desperate urge to give her peace. Finally, he turns away. His voice is hollow as he confesses he cannot be a man who forgives. Destruction is all he knows. When she asks who he really is, he stares back with chilling resolve. He is the monster who will torch his own soul to keep her alive. Emma is shattered. She asks what is left when the threats are dead and he cannot recognize his own reflection. His answer is ice cold. At least, she would be breathing. The deepest tragedy of love is that sometimes saving the person you cherish means completely losing yourself in the dark. Lucian drifts toward the door, murmuring that her survival is all that matters. Emma lets out a scream that freezes him in his tracks. Breathing is not the same as actually living. Surviving in the shadows is not a life. She refuses to watch him butcher his humanity for her safety. Lucian spins around, his face twisted in agony. He asks if she wants him to gamble her life on the hope of mercy. Emma closes the gap, begging him to use his wealth to find a path without a river of blood. He calls it a naive fantasy, but she grabs his shaking hands. A crime boss and a cleaning woman falling in love was a fantasy too, yet here they are. Real growth happens when we stop running and choose to build a future, even when the unknown is totally terrifying. Lucian warns she has zero clue what she is asking. Emma holds her ground. She wants him to choose the living woman right in front of him instead of crossing the point of no return. A heavy silence drops. You can see the absolute war on Lucian's face between fear and desperation. Out of nowhere, he snaps. He rips off his tactical vest and chucks it across the room with a loud curse. Emma holds her breath as this hardened boss collapses into a chair, burying his face in his hands. He admits he spent his life building empires on terror. He knows no other way. Emma kneels before him, promising they will find a new path together. Sometimes, the absolute bravest thing anyone can do is risk looking weak just to protect the fragile love they have finally managed to find. Listen closely to this moment, friends. Emma whispers he has already won the war. Now, he must prove he is strong enough to drop his weapon. Lucian is dead silent. Then, he pulls her into his lap and buries his face in her neck. His shoulders shake with a sound that is half sob and half hollow laughter. This hardened boss is finally breaking open. Emma holds him. When he finally speaks, he agrees to let his men handle the raid. But he warns her, if his mercy gets her hurt, they face the fallout together. She kisses his forehead, telling him no more carrying the world alone. They are doing this differently. He nods, gripping her waist with trembling hands. Real partnership means sharing the heaviest burdens, even when stepping into the unknown is totally terrifying. This massive choice might actually save them. The final assault goes down without Lucian in the room. Emma watches the silent surveillance feeds, feeling his hand crush hers as his enforcers execute the raid. 17 wild minutes, 8 enemies dead, the rest surrendering. The war is officially over. Lucian makes 2 quiet calls. One to banish the survivors from the city, and another to a detective trading dead men's secrets to erase his own past. Then he turns off his phone, pulls Emma against his chest, and freezes. An hour passes in silence. Emma's brother, Caleb, finds them huddled on the couch like shipwreck survivors. Stepping away from your darkest demons is never a clean break. It is a slow, exhausting exhale after holding your breath for your entire life. Caleb confirms the coast is clear. The massive mansion is a total write-off. The walls can be rebuilt, but their old life is turned to ash. Emma feels Lucian tense up, quietly grieving the pieces of his history. She whispers they will build something legit, with a foundation not soaked in blood. Lucian holds her tighter. Caleb rolls his wheelchair forward, asking the big question. What comes next? They cannot hide forever. Lucian sits up, running a tired hand through his hair. He has a clean penthouse in the city, with zero ties to the underworld. A fresh start. When Emma asks about his crime empire, his voice goes flat. He is liquidating the darkness. Moving forward often means letting your old monuments burn to the ground, just so you can finally see the clear sky above. Lucian admits dismantling his underworld will take time, but he can do it. Emma stares at him in awe. This boss is actually walking away from the throne, so they never have to look over their shoulders. Emma warns that going clean will spawn vicious new enemies. Lucian flashes a razor-sharp smile. He is not going soft, just picking a different battlefield. But this piece is fragile. You and I know the past is never truly done with us. Caleb clears his throat, looking dead at his sister. Emma's stomach drops. The dreaded moment is here. Her brother wants the ugly truth about the lies she fed him. She sits across his wheelchair, bracing her heart. Caleb's voice is level, though his scarred hands shake. He wants to know everything, starting with the tragic fire. Emma rips off the band-aid and strips away the lies. She tells Caleb about the beatings, admitting that at 9 years old, blinded by anger, she lit the match that started the fire. She spills the painful history of running fake names, crushing debt and scrubbing floors in a mobster's home to survive. When she finishes, Caleb is crying quietly. Emma's voice shatters as she apologizes for building their life on secrets. Caleb wipes his eyes and begs her to stop apologizing. She was just a kid, carrying that massive weight alone for 15 years to protect him. We often forget how much brutal strength survival requires. True forgiveness does not demand a flawless apology. It simply asks us to see the heavy burdens our loved ones carried in the dark to keep us safe. Caleb holds her shaking hands. He is not mad about the fire, just heartbroken she felt forced to hide it. Emma swears she only wanted to protect him, but Caleb reminds her he is 19. He survived losing his legs, mob attacks, and watching their home burn. He does not see a monster. He sees the fiercely loyal sister who sacrificed everything for his sake. Pulling her into a hug, Caleb asks her to finally stop carrying the world alone. He tells her to let him and Lucian share the heavy weight. Over in the shadows, Lucian stands a silent watch, giving them the space to heal. Love is not just about shielding your family from the storm. Sometimes the absolute bravest act of love is putting down your armor and letting someone else hold the umbrella. Pause right here, guys, because this is peak cinema. Emma is standing there, wiping away tears, looking at her brother and the most dangerous man in the city, who is completely down bad for her. They look back like she is the center of the universe. She admits she has zero clue how to trust. But Lucian, this absolute mafia boss, steps up and swears they will figure it out together. Cut to that afternoon. They move into a massive penthouse in Tribeca with huge glass windows over the Hudson River. Emma is totally mind-blown that this ruthless mob boss flipped his entire destiny just for her. But hey, here is the lesson. Sometimes the people who have been absolutely shattered by the world are the exact ones who know how to put your broken pieces back together. Lucian hands her a glass of whiskey while she looks down at the insane city drop. Emma straight up confesses she is just waiting for this dream to explode in her face. But Lucian puts a heavy hand on her back to ground her, promising her this is completely real. She asks how two broken people are supposed to fake a normal life. He just hits her with this quiet smile. They are not faking anything. They are building their own normal. He is taking his underworld empire totally legal. Caleb is heading to college, and nobody is looking over their shoulders anymore. Emma finally feels some she breathed 15 years ago. Hope. You and I know how rare that is because, listen, you do not need a spotless past to build a peaceful future. You just need the courage to stick around. Imagine standing on the edge of something totally terrifying, knowing it could absolutely wreck you. Emma whispers that he makes it sound too easy. Lucian sets his drink down with heavy boss energy and tells her straight up that it will be messy. He grabs her face in his scarred hands, saying he wants to see what they can build when they stop just surviving. She admits she is terrified, and he drops the hardest line. Then let us be terrified together. Their kiss is not some desperate fight anymore. It is soft, like they actually have all the time in the world. Here is the real truth drop. The bravest thing a broken person can do is drop their guard and choose love. She tells him she loves his reckless self. Holding her tight, he smiles, saying he loves her habit of running into danger. Emma jokes they are perfect for each other in the most dysfunctional way possible. They hold each other while the Manhattan sun sets. Out there, the city is a brutal meat grinder, but up here, these two battle-hardened people finally found peace. Will it be easy forever? No, you cannot just delete a mob history, but right now they have each other. Fast forward 3 months, and the vibe totally shifts. Emma is literally fighting a coffee maker, praying she does not burn breakfast again. Domestic life is not her strong suit, but she is learning how to truly live. Even Caleb is crushing his online university classes and pushing hard through his physical therapy. It just goes to show that taking small steps every single day will eventually build the absolute biggest victories. Caleb is finally looking at his future with bright eyes. Meanwhile, Lucian is literally ripping his criminal empire apart at the roots to go completely legal. He is fighting daily to buy out ruthless mob bosses. Trauma does not just vanish, though. The nightmares still hunt them both. Emma wakes up terrified of ghost flames, while Lucian jolts awake, grabbing for a gun that is no longer there. But instead of suffering alone, they learn to heal together. One morning, Lucian strolls into the kitchen in just sweatpants. He gently takes the spatula from Emma, pointing out she is burning the eggs. She argues she wanted to surprise him. He jokes the real surprise is that the smoke alarms are still quiet. The lesson here is simple. Real healing is just finding laughter in the middle of a messy life. Lucian tells her to sit and let him handle the food. Emma leans against the marble island, just watching. Think about the absolute plot twist here. The boogeyman of the underworld is standing in a sunny kitchen scrambling eggs. He catches her staring. She laughs, saying it is crazy how weird their life is right now. He raises an eyebrow, asking if it is a good weird or bad weird. She smiles, confirming it is definitely good. She thinks about how she used to scrub dirty floors at night, marveling at how far she has come. Then Lucian completely shifts the vibe. He looks dead at her and says he has been thinking about their future. Her heart drops. Then he drops the absolute nuke. He wants to marry her. Boom. Emma freezes with her coffee cup hovering right in mid-air. Sometimes life flips fast, and you just have to hold on for the ride. He tells her he wants her to be his wife. Emma is totally glitching out, stammering they have only been together for 3 months. But Lucian is absolutely locked in. He has loved her since she stood covered in blood in that warehouse, protecting her brother. Emma panics, saying they barely know how to be normal. He grabs her hand across the cold marble, snapping her out of it. He knows she is terrified and thinks she does not deserve good things, but his grip is pure iron. He reminds her he literally ripped his criminal empire to shreds just to keep her. He is not going to just bail. She starts crying, whispering he cannot promise that. He pulls her close and swears he will fight like hell to make it true. Listen, real love is not about guaranteed safety. It is about fighting the absolute worst odds together. You and I know exactly how terrifying it is to drop your defenses, right? Lucian does not even force a yes out of her. He just asks her to think about whether they have earned the right to build a real home. Emma buries her face in his chest, terrified of ruining everything. He just strokes her hair, reminding her how tough she is. He promises they will figure out the messy parts together. She looks up at this former kingpin who destroyed his own underworld to protect her and promises to think about it. The absolute relief on his face is unreal. They hold each other in the morning light, their breakfast getting totally cold. Caleb is definitely eavesdropping nearby. But then her phone violently buzzes, completely shattering the quiet, because here is the harsh truth. Peace is an ongoing process, not a permanent state. Emma pulls the phone out, and her body instantly goes rigid. Lucian snaps into threat mode, his old Mafia reflexes kicking right in. But this is no assassin. Emma is choking on her words as she reads the email. New York University, a full-ride scholarship for social work. Lucian grabs her shoulders, incredibly proud, but Emma is totally spiraling. She never even applied. Lucian casually admits he pulled some massive favors to get her foot in the door. He only provided the key, but the hard work will be all on her. Emma is terrified she cannot pull off being a normal student, but Lucian looks dead in her eyes and tells her she is done just surviving. Now she is becoming. Let that sink in for a minute. Surviving a brutal storm is completely different from actually building a house in the aftermath. Emma looks up, the trauma of her past keeping her frozen. She is terrified that chasing this dream will pull her too far from his dark history. But Lucian does not hesitate. He swears he will hold her up no matter the cost. And guys, that is what true devotion looks like. It does not force your dreams to match perfectly. It just gives them room to breathe. Overwhelmed, Emma pulls him into a desperate, crazy kiss. When she pulls back, she whispers for him to ask the question again. Lucian searches her eyes and drops the proposal that changes everything. This time, she hits him with a massive, zero hesitation yes. He scoops her up, spinning her around the kitchen. Right on cue, Caleb rolls his wheelchair in with a huge smirk. He was waiting for this outcome just as much as they were. Caleb starts trolling, teasing that Lucian asked for his blessing days ago. Emma looks at these two guys who became her universe, realizing they are about to be official on paper. But Caleb hits her with facts. They were already family. The paper just makes it harder for the world to rip them apart. For the first time, Emma looks at the future and sees a promise instead of a threat. Fast forward 6 months. We are in a quiet Manhattan courthouse. Emma is rocking a simple white dress, holding wildflowers. Caleb is in the front row, beaming. There are 0 mobsters here. No underworld shadows in sight. Just people watching 2 broken souls finally build something solid. We all know blood does not make you family. True family is choosing to stay in the fire together, even when running is easier. Fast forward to an epic plot twist, guys. You and I are watching them stand before a judge who looks straight into their damaged souls. The judge drops heavy truth about marriage. It is easy to run when pain gets loud, but the ultimate life lesson is that true love means choosing to stand your ground together. Emma grips Lucian's hand, feeling the violent scars from his past. She looks into his eyes and sees his dark ghosts, but also the fierce devotion that rewrote his destiny. Her vow is rock solid, and Lucian's voice does not shake at all. When they are pronounced married, Lucian pulls her close and kisses her like the rest of the world just evaporated. In that crazy embrace, Emma feels the pure joy of a bright future she never thought she would ever experience. The ceremony wraps up with Caleb whistling loudly and Clara wiping happy tears. Right then, something broken inside Emma finally snaps back into place. It is pure peace. Listen carefully. The greatest life lesson is that peace is not just the absence of war. It is the absolute certainty that when the next storm hits, you will not stand in the rain alone. They enjoy a warm dinner completely free of Mafia threats. Seeing Caleb laugh so freely makes Emma's chest ache with gratitude. Later that night, back at the penthouse, Lucian scoops her up and carries her over the threshold. He treats her with a gentle reverence that opposes the brutal mobster he used to be. Tangled up in those insanely expensive sheets, Emma listens to the steady drum of his heartbeat and knows she is finally safe. Let's set the scene, guys. The big bad mob boss himself, Lucian, is just chilling, asking his girl what's on her mind. Emma is low-key freaking out, admitting she's terrified. This piece is just a fake setup. But Lucian, he doesn't give her that toxic positivity garbage. He straight up tells her things will hit the fan, but they'll face the total chaos together. Two absolute train wrecks teaming up. She gives him this massive kiss, thanking him for looking past her crazy armor and giving her a reason to stop running. And he's just hyped. He doesn't have to be a total monster anymore. Here's the lesson. Real love isn't about ignoring the absolute mess. It's about finding someone willing to clean it up with you. Fast forward an entire year and get a load of this insane plot twist. Emma's literally walking across a graduation stage. The girl who caught her first body at just 9 years old is getting a college diploma. Lucian and Caleb are out there in the crowd, screaming their lungs out like total fanboys. She's straight up bawling, and honestly, who wouldn't? It's the ultimate flex. She survived the brutal underworld and came out on top. Later on, they're popping ridiculously expensive champagne to celebrate. Caleb toasts her for being an absolute unit and never tapping out when things got super dark. Here's the life lesson for you. Sometimes your absolute biggest flex isn't taking someone else down, it's building yourself up. Emma throws the respect right back at Caleb, giving him major props for crushing his brutal physical therapy. Caleb just smiles, basically saying she's the one who taught them all how to be absolute survivors in the dark. And right under the table, Lucian grabs her hand and, yeah, you guessed it, she's rocking a massive wedding ring. Now, talk about locking it down. Later, they're chilling on a fancy balcony looking out over the entire city. You and I both know there are tons of people out there fighting their own secret, silent wars every single day. Healing from that kind of trauma is an absolute grind. But let me tell you, the ultimate life lesson. Standing at the top of the mountain makes every single brutal scar totally worth it. So they're just soaking in the massive city skyline, and Lucian drops the million-dollar question. Does she have any regrets about all the absolute chaos they went through? Emma literally doesn't even blink. She straight up tells him no way, because they didn't just survive this mafia madness. They completely won the game. And Lucian, the dude who literally burned his entire dark empire to the ground for her, tells her this right here is way better than any mob boss power trip. They built a real life together. The life lesson here is super simple, but hits hard. Winning doesn't always mean destroying your enemies. Sometimes the ultimate victory is just finding someone who actually helps you carry your heavy baggage instead of adding to it. Let's be real for a second, guys. Fairy tales are total garbage. No magic wand is going to fix the wild trauma these two went through. For over a year, Emma was pacing around Lucian's giant mansion like a trapped ghost, surviving a crazy underground mob war that almost wiped them off the map. But look at her now. Her brother's completely safe, the bad guys are dust, and she's finally catching her breath. She's not just in survival mode anymore, and here's a life lesson you really need to hear right now. Real happiness isn't some random prize you just stumble upon or steal from someone else. It's an absolute fortress you have to build up with your own two bare hands, brick by heavy brick, and then totally defend with your life. She's just leaning back against Lucian, watching the sun come up over a city that literally tried to chew her up and spit her out. Sure, tomorrow's probably going to throw some new crazy mobsters and drama their way, because that's just how this brutal underworld works. But right now, absolute peace. Here's the ultimate life lesson to take away from this entire wild ride. Home's never just an address or a fancy building. Home is finding that one crazy person who sees all your absolute worst red flags and completely refuses to run away. After running for 15 brutal, exhausting years, our girl Emma's finally hitting the brakes. The massive chase is officially over, and she can finally close her eyes and just breathe.